Not many people here, but we'll do it anyway. Let's have a word of prayer and then we'll get started. Father in heaven, we thank you for our evening together, an evening that we have planned, but you may have some other ideas and thoughts. And we pray our hearts and our minds are open to you. In your name we pray. Amen. Why don't you three ladies come on up here? Sit with Judy. You guys can hold hands up here. Yeah. I have the privilege to introduce you to three ladies that I've known a while, and they're from three different organizations and three different groups that service people with mental illness and their families. And we're going to go by their acronyms that they use, and then they'll tell you what those acronyms stand, what those those letters stand for. And I'm going to ask Pat Beeman to come on up. And Pat Beeman's going to talk to you about NAMI, and she'll tell you what NAMI stands for. Over the years, this name has changed for a variety of reasons. She might give you a history lesson. I don't know, but probably not. Okay. All right, Pat, you're probably going to need this because it's being streamed.
Okay. All right. Oh, I haven't used a microphone. As Mike said, I'm a volunteer with NAMI. Oh, sorry. As Mike said, I'm a volunteer with NAMI Marion Polk, and NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's a nationwide organization in all of the states, including Oregon. We have about 15 affiliates in Oregon, and almost everyone involved is a volunteer. So in Paxton, Marion, Polk counties, where I volunteer, we have no paid employees at all. They do have a couple in Lane County and in the Portland area. And I brought in a few pieces of paper. This one gives you information about NAMI, and I know it goes into it, and it says it's the largest grassroots organization dedicated to helping families and individuals with mental illness. And it was actually started by family members. And I got involved with NAMI when my son had a brain injury in an auto accident, and it ended up developing into a mental illness because he had so much frontal lobe damage. So I was totally clueless. I didn't know what to do, and someone told me about the NAMI Family to Family class, and my whole family who were supporting our son went, and it changed every one of us. It was a total life change because we learned what mental illness was, and we learned how we could help our family member and how we could help ourselves to deal with this. And that was 25 years ago. And we're still helping our son and ourselves too. So I brought a few things about NAMI. This one goes into our groups we have in the Marion Polk area, actually specifically in the Salem area. We have a family support group that meets at Salem Hospital on the second and fourth Saturdays. And we have a connection support group, and I have some brochures about that, and that's for the individual with the mental health diagnosis. And it meets at the Rock on Silverton Road, Recovery Outreach Community Center, on Mondays and Thursdays of every week. So it's very available, and the Rock also has great services. And we also have a new program we're starting called Ending the Silence, and it goes into middle schools and high schools, and we have a team of two. One, a person who developed mental health issues in their school years, and the other one is a family member of someone who developed the issues and who is trying to be as supportive as they can. So we actually have just started that program. It's fairly new, and Salem Kaiser School District is also trying to do something to help with mental health issues, because they've noticed the stress level in students has gone up dramatically. So we're going to be working with them Let me think. Oh, we also do a family-to-family class, and that's now an 8-week class, and we usually do that at Salem Hospital also. And it's a wonderful way to learn all about what the illnesses are, what medications do, how we can help our family members, how we can make sure we take care of ourselves also. Just so many helpful things. Like I say, that changed my entire family. Is there anything else I should mention? Okay, and I have a few brochures on family to family. It's just a great educational program, and family members come and they really get very close because each one of them has their own story. They can share their story, they can get help from each other, they get the educational background about all these different ways that mental health affect people and how it varies so much, how to deal with doctors, how to deal with other people who might not understand why your family member is having issues, because we seem to treat mental health issues a lot different than we treat other biological illnesses. People understand a broken arm. They don't understand when there's a brain issue sometimes. So it really gets into all the dynamics of that and how it's all a biological thing. You know, it's not an act of will or anything like that. Do we do questions now, or? Okay. Thanks.
Okay, our next presenter, always got to look at my notes, Sandy Bumpus. Now, I got to do a plug here because this was my wife's baby many years ago. She started this organization. 50,000, no, not quite, 20 some odd years ago. Oh, I don't know, so many years ago, I forget. Anyway, she started it, so this is a very special group to her and to me. When we started this, she started this. We traveled all over the state. I felt like a vagabond. I did my shtick with the adults, and she did her shtick with the kids. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it, Judy? Especially went to Eastern Oregon. Oh, that was a trip and a half. Well, anyway, come on up, share with us.
Great. Well, I have a funny story about these brochures. Our regular brochures there in the front, if you want to pass those around. And as Mike said, my name is Sandy Bumpus. I am the parent of a young adult who has struggled with mental health challenges since the age of 3. The first time somebody suggested there might be something wrong, the first response was, you need to go get help and go here and call this number. And it turned out to be the wrong place. Right? And a lot of families have that experience. And we spent a good 8 years, I would say, really struggling to get the right services. And it's not uncommon. My child's mental health was pretty complex. Like they could definitely say there was ADHD involved. They could say that there was some hyperactivity involved with that. But there was always a big question mark. We didn't know completely what was going on. So at about the age of 15, we got a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, and then not long after that, about 6 months later, of schizophrenia, and also major depression was always something that was there. As a parent, as a single parent, I struggled a lot because it wasn't uncommon for my child to say to me, Mom, I just want to die. That's all I wanted. I just want to die. And I didn't know how to respond to that. And every door we turned, that we opened, it just seemed to be the wrong place until one day my oldest actually was walking down the Burnside Bridge, hadn't come home from school, which was really unusual, and we were on the phone to the police when she came walking through the door, only to let us know that she had been thinking about jumping off the bridge. and had turned around and decided to come home, which we're very thankful for. And that was the point when we actually got into some of the services that we really needed. We were very fortunate to get connected up with some excellent doctors who really helped us out in that journey. But as many of you know, when kids are not getting their needs met in school, they lose a lot. They lose their self-esteem, they lose friends, they lose their sense of confidence. And I do see those impacts still today in my daughter, who is 36 years old, which I cannot believe. So anyway, I've been the director of Oregon Family Support Network. I've known Judy for many, many years before I even started doing this. And I was kind of an unwilling advocate, but somehow wanted to change the system. I didn't want to just help one family here and there. I wanted to change the whole system, and that's how I feel like I found myself doing what I'm doing today. So Oregon Family Support Network, we actually work with parents who are raising children ages 0 to 18, sometimes 21, depending on what's going on, who are struggling with mental health challenges. We have grown a lot as an organization. We work statewide. When I took this job about 8 years ago, we had about 20 staff working as family support specialists, all who have this lived experience that I'm sharing with you today. And now we have about 87 staff, thanks to a lot of growth and support for the work we do around the state. But still, when you think about the statistics, one statistic came out today from the Oregon Health Authority. Oregon Health Authority sent out a bulletin today saying that suicide is now the #1 cause of death among children and youth. And that is such a sad statistic. It was the second leading cause of death. And Oregon also moved from 17th among all states to 11th among all states in the number of kids and youth that we're losing to suicide. So some of the work that we have been doing has been trying to make a difference as far as that goes. We work one-on-one with families. So we do 3 things in our organization. We provide support, education, and advocacy. And the support piece is that we're actually going around and we're working one-on-one with families as they're walking through the system. And we're just helping them to get connected to the services they need and helping them to navigate all the various services that they're involved in, or all the systems that they're involved in. We support them through support groups. We really like to connect families and make sure that they are finding one another and sharing their experience so they know they're not alone. And so we can reduce the stigma and the silence, as Pat was saying earlier. And then we provide education. And we provide education to parents. We want them to know how to, be effective in getting their needs met. So some of the work we do is helping them understand how to get that in the education system, because a lot of our kids are involved in special education, and we have challenges getting our needs met there. We also provide training for systems partners. When I was first doing this work, it was not uncommon for, when we went to a presentation to talk to a residential provider or that sort of thing, which we often got invited to do. It wasn't uncommon for us to say, hey, well, we'll work with you. Well, you're invited to come and talk to us anytime, but we don't want to work with the families who are responsible for their kids being here, because we feel like they're the reason that our kids are here. And we said, well, unfortunately, the way to make progress and to really help families is to meet them where they're at. So if they're here, you need to work with them and support them, even if, there are all these other things going on. Kids don't just get better miraculously by themselves. You have to really work with their families as well. So we train over 2,000 people a year, including families and providers around the state of Oregon. Now, Oregon, for those, I'm sure many here may not be aware, but Oregon has a credential for someone like myself or Pat or others who have had this, what we call lived experience, who want to work in the system to help others. There are actually jobs that are related to that. And OFSN offers a training because we actually, in order to be able to do this work, you have to take a 40-hour training or an 80-hour training, depending on what it is you want to do. And you have to be able to show that you've been through that in order to do this work. And that's a good thing because there's a lot of information you need to know. We teach a lot of folks about the family movement, which is really important, and how to treat families and how to empower families in this work. As I mentioned, we work around the state. We just launched a new program called Reach Out Oregon, and I have some flyers here about this today. I wanted to say that even with all the work we're doing around the state, 1 out of 8 kids in the state of Oregon will experience significant mental health challenges at some point in their life. And yet maybe only 20 to 25% of those children, their youth, and their families actually get the support and help that they need. So we set out a number of years ago to figure out how can we have more of an impact and help more folks. So these are actually the Spanish version of the flyer. I grabbed the wrong pile. But basically what the whole point of this program is, the flyer at the very top says, parenting can be challenging. That's true for all of us, regardless of what kind of struggles our kids are having, right? It's challenging. But just beneath that, we say, we're in this together. So we want families to know you have an ally and you have a way to connect and get support. Reach Out Oregon has a warm line that any parent can call at any time, or you can get there through email or chat. Even though this is in Spanish, I will give this to Mike, and then somehow I'll find a way to get you guys some English version of the flyer so that you can check this out. For Reach Out Oregon? No. Oh, for OFSN. So yes, you can Reach Out Oregon through there. I also brought some cards because these business cards have our website address and the number for the warm line. So we can at least get those out to you all. IEP training? Yes, so what I was talking about earlier, we really want to empower families. That's the other thing that we do. That's the result of the support, education, and advocacy we do. The whole point of that is to empower families. We want families to be able to know exactly how to get what they need. And so some of the trainings that we offer have to do with the IEP process. How do you get what you need when your child is in special education and the teachers are saying, we want you to put your child on medication. So please go see your doctor and come back when you have that prescription and everything will be A-okay, right? But oftentimes when somebody's telling us something like that, we don't realize, I have a choice about that. I may not want my child on medication, and there may be a lot of good reasons to not go there first, right? So that's why we do some of the training we do. For families who have kids in special education, there's IEP Basics, which gives you just the general overview of what your rights are as a parent and how to work with the school system around getting your child's needs met. And even if anybody here is not experiencing that, I bet you all know someone who is, right? We also have training to help families understand, like, what do I want an IEP? Maybe I don't want that. I don't want to label my child, but they do need some help. So there are some other options available. So then we have a training called IEP or 504 because the civil liberties law actually has a section 504 that is for people with disabilities that can help establish accommodations for those individuals without having to go through the special education process. And then the other thing is, how do you, if you have a child who is in special education and they're there because they have some significant behavioral health challenges or they're getting in trouble in school all the time because of those things, how do you deal with that effectively in your child's IEP, especially if their behavior is a result of their mental health challenges, right? They shouldn't be held responsible for something they can't control. So those are the kinds of trainings that we provide as well. Anyway, we do a lot of things, and I probably would take more than my share of time to explain it all.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay. We're going to have in a few minutes, we got one more, and then we're going to take questions that you might have. Jean Lassiter is going to come up here and talk to you a program called ESA, and she'll explain to you what ESA is. And I just discovered about this about 5 years ago, and one of my people that worked on the board with me with NAMI helped establish, I can't think of her name now. Do you know? Yeah, Tamara. Okay, that's all yours.
Thank you, Mike. So I think it's a good opportunity for me to talk to you about two programs that I've been associated with for a number of years. So the first one is ESA, and ESA stands for Early Assessment and Support Alliance. And ESA was actually started as it was called the EAST program, and it started here in Marion County with the Behavioral Care Network, and that was really at the, just before 2000. So in the late 90s, they started the ESA program, and it was modeled after a program that they were already doing in Australia. And what they had discovered was that if you can intercede with a young person when they are within a year or less of their first experience of psychosis, and you wrap services around them and you work with them to keep them as close to a positive life trajectory as you can get them while they're experiencing psychosis, you can really change the outcome of that disease progression. So EAST and then ESA started. And I work at the Oregon Health Authority, and ESA is one of the programs that I've been responsible for the last several years. And we have been able to spread ESA around. We have ESA programs in 35 out of 36 counties, and we serve between 500 and 600 young people a year. The incidence of psychosis is 1 per 100. So it's a relatively very specific condition. And so ESA is a very narrow slice of mental health interventions that we have here in Oregon. ESA is one of the first statewide systematic programs, so statewide programs in the country to address early psychosis or first episode psychosis, as they call it. So what happens? What do parents need to look for when they're concerned about their child? So as I mentioned before, the purpose of ESA is to get in there early and help families and their children early on. So this I printed out some brochures and I left them at home, so I'll make sure that that you guys get some. So what we want to do is so community outreach is part of the ESA model. And it's really important for those teams. So each team in each county in Oregon spends part of its time going out into the community to communicate what parents, what teachers, what family members and community members need to look for when we're talking about the first episodes of psychosis. So there's a lot of stuff that happens before an actual experience of psychosis. So one of the things you might look for is a reduced performance. And what that means is that the young person has trouble reading or understanding complex sentences. So usually psychosis onset happens somewhere between 12 and 30, actually. The average age for participants in ESA is 17. So we're talking about adolescence or young adulthood. We're talking about a kind of a decline in, so the young person, we have had around us for a long time starts to actually change. So reduced performance, that they have trouble speaking or understanding what others are saying, so their ability to kind of understand what's happening and to do things they've been able to do for a long time declines. They might get easily confused or lost. They might have trouble in sports or other activities, so they might have been a really good basketball player, and then all of a sudden they can't dribble a basketball. They might have attendance problems at work or school related to sleep or fearfulness. There's also some behavioral changes that might precede psychosis, and those include extreme fear for no apparent reason, uncharacteristic actions or statements that make no sense, impulsive and reckless behavior, so like giving away all their belongings, doing something that just doesn't seem to make sense at all to you. Extreme social withdrawal, incoherent or bizarre writing, decline in appearance or hygiene, so not taking showers, sleeping too much or not enough, and then dramatic changes in eating behavior. So you're seeing a young person in front of you start to really change. They also might exhibit what we call perceptual changes, so things like fear that other people are trying to hurt them, heightened sensitivity to sounds, sight, smells, or touch. So the sensory impact of psychosis is really can be really strong. Making statements like "my brain is playing tricks on me," hearing voices or other sounds, reporting visual changes like colors are more intense, faces are looking strange or distorted, and lines turn wavy. So a lot of the senses, there's a disruption of senses. Racing thoughts and feeling like someone else is putting thoughts into their brain. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that people might notice and pay attention to. So when we have a referral to ESA, generally the referrals happen between the ages of 12, as I said, and maybe 19 or 20. So psychosis has that range of onset. And we have programs all over the state. The website for ESA is www.esacommunity.org, and that's the statewide website. And if you go onto that website, you can find programs that are in your area, and you can get in touch with the programs there. The ESA model is what we call a coordinated specialty care model, so it requires a team of people. And that team of people consists of a care coordinator, a prescriber, an occupational therapist, a nurse, and a supported employment specialist, a supported education specialist, and a peer support specialist. So what we found over the years is that if you can be very holistic in the way that you work with a young person and their family, you can really make a difference in how things go. And so that's the model of ESA, and we have a fidelity standard that we hold programs to, and we go out and provide technical assistance and training to staff in the mental health programs that provide ESA. There's also multifamily groups and other peer-related groups for young people. So there's attention paid to families and the young people and how to kind of navigate the things that are happening. 2 years. ESA is a 2-year program, so it's limited in duration, and as I mentioned before, it's really it's a transitional program that's really designed to come in early, to be relatively intensive and very supportive, and then always keeping in mind that our job is to launch you out into the world as well as you can be, you and your family. what we know about ISA and is that sometimes the young people don't transition successfully because a lot of times our mental health supports and services are not sufficient, but we're working on that. So how much time do I have, Mike? I got a minute. No. Okay. Well, so that's ISA, and I'll just stop there. Yeah.
I'm going to have these three ladies come on up, and you might have some more questions for all three of them or one of them. So come on up, ladies, and you can pass the baton here and answer any questions they might have. So come on up. What did I want to say here? Oh, about Isa. Isa, I wish was around when our son became ill. It would have been a tremendous difference, but that's part of life. I wish it had happened, but now it has happened. And what's so neat about it is they'll come alongside the families. They'll come alongside the young adult, and they'll work with them. And it's not shame-based at all. It's really encouraging. And to have all those professionals right there with you, going through this with you. It's not just one person. You have to go to this person, and then you have to go to this agency, and then you have to go to that. They're all together. And that's unbelievable. And this isn't just happening in Oregon. This is in many of the states, and all but one county. Won't mention who it is. And Marion County is covered, which is really kind of neat. So these gals are here to answer questions you might have, and maybe they can stay afterwards. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But a question. Anybody has a question they want to ask? Go. Okay.
On the sheet, it mentions them, that Mike handed out. It talks about the groups we have. Yes, they are going on all the time. Yes. There are different groups. We have support groups plus classes, plus we have the In Our Own Voice, where people who are dealing and living with a mental illness can go out and speak to groups also. We have In Our Own Voice people who go to speak to police trainings. In fact, they have one coming up this month that some of our volunteers are going to. And it has really made a huge difference now that police are getting crisis intervention training, and they're actually learning about mental health issues, and they're actually hearing from individuals who live with a mental health issue, and sometimes family members too. I think for family members who are dealing with these issues, the family support group is great. It really, you're with other people who understand. I believe it's listed there as, let me grab a sheet too, as family support group. No, it's like the third paragraph. NAMI Marion Polk provides a family support group on the second and fourth Saturdays. And it has the time and the location also. And there's also the phone number you can call if you have any questions. It's actually my phone number. And at the very bottom, it lists our email address too, if you ever want to reach. It's under the family to family class, the namimarionpolk@gmail.com. And any question you have will be referred to a volunteer.
My wife could probably speak to this better than I can. The issues that kids have, that'd be Sandy, and their issues are a lot different than adults. And they have support groups too. Is that correct? And if you call Oregon Family Support Network, they can tell you exactly where these folks are meeting in Marion County. Is that correct? Yeah. And then it's in the... You want to say more?
One more thing to say to that too. Actually, in Marion County, we are very fortunate to have a community-based family support program, which means we can actually not only take phone calls from families, we can actually work with you one-on-one and also let them know about the support group meetings and that kind of thing to help them get, some of those challenges resolved. And depending on what it is, it can be very complex. It may need more than just, a phone call or a support group meeting. But I think the support group meetings are really valuable because there are other parents there. Everybody's sort of at a different stage of, development, involvement, or situation. And oftentimes I have found that, a lot of really great ideas come out of those support group meetings. And for someone who is sort of struggling and not knowing what to do, that can be really helpful. So I would encourage you that, if you have a friend who, could use some support with, minor children who are under the age of 18, to call us at our statewide office, which the number is listed on our regular brochure there, and we'll get you all connected. And then Reach Out Oregon is also designed to help support those needs as well. So.
Yes. Yes, okay.
I read a few things on that, and one of them is our brains change as we grow, and there's we have more connections at the beginning of our life than we end up with later, and around puberty there's pruning of some of these, and once in a while something's pruned that shouldn't have been pruned, and there's issues. Plus other factors come in, like with my son, he had a brain injury. And we didn't realize, he went through all the physical care. He had 4 surgeries. They had to totally rebuild his face. And he has metal plates and all that. I had no idea there was a mental aspect to it too, but it gradually crept in. And that's why we were blindsided, because we didn't realize. We don't learn about these things in school. But it seems to be a change that happens in the brain. And there could be trauma, whether it's physical or emotional. I think people who witness very traumatic experiences or come from traumatic homes, there's all kinds of things, or just even hearing about something. And it seems like we're having more of the problem now in the schools, with the suicide rate and everything. I kind of wonder if all the news sometimes affects kids too. Probably lots and lots of factors.
So I would just suggest that if you have access to the web, the internet, if you go to www.esacommunity.org, there's a whole ton of resources, and I just didn't want to answer your question because I'm not a neurobiologist. I don't know all of the factors that contribute to emerging psychosis. So, but if you go to that website, you'll find a lot of information. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it has a lot of meanings, obviously. But in this case, what it means is that we have an ideal way of doing ESA. And so there are parts of that go into what we call fidelity guidelines. So fidelity means being true. And so what we do is we provide technical assistance and training to the people who do ESA, so that they can deliver the service in a way that's consistent or has fidelity to the model that we've designed. Yes, yeah, being true to the model. Yes, exactly. That's across Oregon, yes. And there's other similar programs in other parts of the United States that do similar things. Yes.
You know, I have to say, it was time for me to leave to go on because then I started working at the state. But I continue to be amazed. We started our program, the Oregon Family Support Network. It was me and my assistant, and we had a board of directors. It was just a small, I'm not gonna lie. Our office was me to the wall to the bench. That's how big our office was. We put our desks, front to front, and then we had a little counter that we put our brochures on, and we had a newsletter. And I am just amazed and so excited at all of the things that Sandy, through Oregon Family Support Network, is doing and the work that they do. But what amazes me even more, not everybody knows about it. Not everybody knows about ESA. Not everybody knows about NAMI, and it is because of the stigma. And that was one of the things that we really fought about, making sure to end the stigma. If you have a broken leg, you go get help. If you have a broken brain, what do? Sit on it and don't tell anybody. Really and truly, we had to decide as a dad and mom, were we going to stand up and fight for Eric? Or were we going to sit back and be quiet? Because he did some different things. I shared with you last week. He did some different things. I don't know if we want people to know about that. Well, you know what? The Lord put Eric in our home. And we thought, he's our son. Yeah, he's doing some different things, but he's still our son. And parents need to step up and be supportive of their children. And it doesn't matter what drum they're beaten to. So stepping back, it was different, but I knew I left it in good hands. And Sandy is the third director, I think. Okay, but I'll tell you, the director that came after me was there maybe a year. The director that came after her was there maybe a year. And then there was somebody else, and then there was Sandy. So, I won't say anymore. Here, somebody, I'm interested.
Any other questions?
I did a little bit of the magic. So I'll leave these with you all.
Okay.
Spanish on the other side.
Mike, I wanted to mention that I brought a sheet. If you're interested, we put out a newsletter, and it tells you some of the resources available. So if you're interested in receiving the newsletter online, you can put your name and your email address, and it goes out every 2 months.
For
Oh, yes, sometimes it's hard to read things. I also brought in a good general overview on mental illness that is a great brochure if you didn't get one. And this is one about the family-to-family course. And this is one about the connection group, which is for the person living with the mental illness.
Well, ladies, thanks for coming. Now, what I want you to do in your packets, if you've brought them with you, is a green sheet. It should be on your left side, if I remember right. And what it does, it talks to you about Marion County services. Now, the three ladies that are here, they're listed, but there are a lot of other services that are available that I would encourage you to keep that. Put that on your refrigerator, because it may not just be for you, but you may run into somebody that needs some of these services, and you can pass this on too. So that's just a very valuable sheet of paper. We're going to now take a look at a DVD that talks about you, the church, and how you, the church, could make a difference. And so without further ado, would you mind putting that DVD on, and we'll watch it. Yeah.
Serious
Well, you better
mental
take it,
illness
'cause everybody's
affects
got
the
this
entire
stuff, so you just
family.
can take it. Here, let me take that.
Striking 1 in 4 families in this country. Illness of the brain, such as major depression, bipolar or manic depression, schizophrenia, and
it's the wrong
various
one.
anxiety disorders, cause real suffering, both to the affected person and their family members and loved ones. Often the people who love a person with a serious mental disorder are the hidden victims, since the impact of these illnesses on their lives is often overlooked or underestimated. Furthermore, because of society's ignorance about these illnesses of the brain, family members often feel guilty and blame themselves for these no-fault illnesses. Often the person with the illness stops coming to their place of worship because of the stigma and shame. Even when these people continue to attend worship, they may be afraid to be open with spiritual leaders and parishioners about their problems. And if serious mental disorders are not addressed openly in the faith community, families suffer in silence at a time when spiritual support is most needed. Another family suffers when there is mental illness. It is the family of faith. Persons struggling with a mental illness are just like you and me. When we fail to get to know these persons because of our own fear or ignorance, the whole faith community loses. Although most people with a serious mental illness struggle with varying degrees of disability, they are still God's children and share the same needs, hopes, losses, joys, and achievements. Through our faith in a loving God, whose love encompasses all, we can discover the unique God-given gifts that they have to offer the whole community. And if we listen to them, they will teach us, and we may hear the voice of God. Coming up, we will look at the story of 2 families who have had to face the reality of a loved one with a chronic mental illness. We will see how a person's spirituality can be a source of healing and hope. And we will see how faith communities can minister more effectively to persons who have a mental illness and to their families. Certain types of serious mental illness, like bipolar depression and schizophrenia, affect an adolescent just as the parents are thinking they have successfully raised their child. Because adolescence can be a confusing and difficult journey, young people are often not diagnosed or treated effectively. Parents are suddenly faced with learning about these illnesses of the brain at the same time they need to be advocating for their child or young adult with schools, doctors, counselors, and sometimes the legal system. Kelly's problems started in her junior year of high school when she was hospitalized for depression, anxiety, and self-destructive behavior. She was able to graduate from high school and then began college. But in her second year of college, her behavior became progressively more unstable, resulting in another hospitalization. This time, her diagnosis was changed to bipolar disorder. As we shall see, Kelly's faith has been an important part of her healing, but the faith community itself is often not prepared to provide the spiritual support that is so needed.
My grandfather, Rabbi Monroe Levins, was the first conservative rabbi in San Diego, and I'm actually pretty proud of that. I didn't get to know him as well as I would have liked because he passed away when I was young, but he's always kind of been an inspiration to me. I've always wanted to, I kind of think maybe if I look up, he'll be there kind of looking down, and I want to make him proud. So, I do my best, and every week when I come here for services, I take a second to give his picture a little kiss and, let him know I'm thinking about him. And I come here every Friday, and I enjoy the services and just kind of, a closeness to God that I can't always find outside. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I really wasn't sure, what did God think about my illness, and why did I have this illness, and was this something that God had intended? And then even, wondering about, well, how does God feel about suicide and me wanting to take my own life? Because I know that, Jews don't really believe in suicide. And what would happen if I really did commit suicide? Or how do Jews feel, and how does God feel about self-mutilation? Because I've had a lot of problems with cutting, and that was a very big coping skill at the time.
I would say it wasn't something that we kept a secret, but it wasn't something that we broadcast. There were certain family members that went through this with us. We have an older daughter who was away at college while a lot of this was happening. And so we were in very close contact with her about things. Jerry has 2 sons from a prior marriage. We were in contact with them.
When we finally realized, I think it was in the fall of 2001, that we were going to have a long-term situation here that we had to work with and deal with, I felt, we talked it over with the family, that Kelly could be very instrumental in possibly helping others by coming out and saying, this is what I have.
When Kelly was first hospitalized, and when she was in her junior year, we didn't get much support at all. It didn't appear that anybody from the religious community really ever visited anybody over at Mesa Vista. And we called and talked to a rabbi, and I really didn't get much response one way or another, much interest. Really nothing. I might want to come in and talk. Oh, sure, call and make an appointment, but, nothing. Nothing where you felt like anybody really cared.
I guess the religious community has to sort of realize that it is an illness, like any other illness, and you don't walk away from somebody, you don't sort of shy away. People have always been a little bit reserved in talking about mental illness in their family, and yet if you have a sore toe, if you have a tooth, if you have any other part of the body, and something goes wrong, you try to get it fixed, but somehow nothing is supposed to go wrong with the brain. And that's where they're missing it. That's where they're missing it.
The thing about Judaism that's so wonderful is that you can have an individual relationship with God. And so it doesn't really matter what the religious institution does. We can still have our own individual relationship with God, who is accepting of this and who loves our daughter and loves us.
Faith leaders can provide referral information to groups providing education, support groups, or advocacy. The National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, or NAMI, the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, the National Mental Health Association, and the American Association of Pastoral Counselors are good sources of information and referral.
I think that we really started to make moves and see things happening when we became affiliated with NAMI. First thing we did was get into their family-to-family program. And I can truly say, and I know Rachel agrees with me on this, that has been the single most helpful encounter, if you want, or involvement that we have had. We went through this very intensive 12-week course, 1 night a week, 3 hours plus. We came away with a 3-ring binder that thick on all the different situations and conditions and things that you need to know to deal with someone in the family or a close friend that has a mental illness.
When I look back on the Jewish traditions and Jewish culture and just Jewish history in general, that really the Jewish people prevailed over a lot of difficulties and things like that. And it makes me feel like, I can go through these hardships, but really I can come out on top and be okay with myself and where I'm at in the world and make a difference regardless of my illness. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, b'chayei olam nota b'tochenu. When I'm asking for help and I'm feeling low, I know that, God's help might not always come in the form that I'd want it to, but it always comes. And, things do get better and I am recovering. And even if they go down again, I'll come up again. And I know that, God's always there for me.
We're very proud of our daughter and how she's managing her illness and the ways that she's gone about trying to take care of herself and learn and educate herself. And that's what we're interested in, is trying to support her through this process and down through our lives together as a family.
Kelly is back in school, working on a part-time basis, and has changed her career direction toward a field where she can use her special insights into mental health issues to help others. When the person with a serious mental illness is your spouse, there are many challenges associated with changes in behavior. Unrecognized or untreated mental illness can lead to frustrations in spousal communications, misunderstanding, and even higher than normal anger and hostility. But the good news is that strong marital support can result in more rapid and longer-lasting improvements in the symptoms. The support and participation of family members may make a great difference in decreasing the symptoms. The faith community can be an important source of support for the spouse and children as they deal honestly with their feelings in an atmosphere of love and acceptance. It's a second marriage for Bob and Donna. Donna experienced some serious bouts of depression following the death of her son, and Bob had a history of bipolar depression prior to their marriage.
I was a military officer, and so there were a lot of times we were separated from my first wife and I, and when we get back together, we'd have differences of opinion on just a whole lot of things. We sensed we were beginning to grow apart, and there were also times when I would have an excessive amount of energy, couldn't sleep well. I recall very vividly, we had gone to bed about 11:30, and about 1:30 I awoke, really couldn't get back to sleep. And then I realized I had never seen the sun come up in Tijuana. So I drove away without saying goodbye to any of my family, rented a car in San Diego, a convertible yet, drove across the border, and at Agua Caliente, January of 1986, I watched the sun come up. And you can just imagine the surprise my first wife had when I drove up at about 8:30 in the morning in this new car.
Would you like some coffee?
Donna and I met at First United Methodist Church. We both come through a long-term marriage, and we had found a singles program offered through the church. And initially, we just became good friends. There were many programs that were going on through the singles group, and weekends offered activities. And shortly thereafter, she invited me to go out to the symphony, and I thought, well, what could that hurt? And after that, we dated for a few months, and the relationship got more serious, and about a year later, we got married. And we've been married now 13 years. So.
Feel better? 6 letters?
Well, I knew he was high energy when we were working together on some of the things at Single File. And actually, that attracted me to him because I was the opposite. And when we dated the first time we went to the symphony, he was pretty, quiet and that. But the second time, he told me that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And he wanted to be upfront about it right from the beginning of our relationship in case there was any difficulty with this later. And to be honest, I really didn't know anything about mental illness, or bipolar was a foreign word to me then. People didn't talk about it much. And when he talked about it, I said, well, let's see. We'll just take it slowly and see how it goes. I had moved to California. I had gone through a divorce in less than a year. My older son's fiance was killed in a car crash. I was without the means to support myself in the manner in which I wanted to be. And so a lot of this started in a depression. And then my son was diagnosed with AIDS. My depression grew after that, and then I started taking medication because I had gotten very, very depressed with his mania and my depression. We kind of talked to each other about we need the medication because of the chemical imbalance. And if you're careful to take yours, I'll be careful to take mine. We kind of encouraged each other through it. And I think it helped that both of us were facing similar but very different problems. But we were there to help each other. When I went to talk to my minister about my depression and Bob's bipolarity, it was helpful because my minister had already been very open about her own mental depression and the times that she had gone through. There were also some laity who were well known in the church who also spoke. And this was a time when people hadn't really come out with any information about themselves as far as depression or any mental illness of any kind. And it started to become more and more open at the church, and I think that helped all of us be able to come to grips with the fact that most people do have it in their family somewhere. They're touched by it somehow through friends or relatives, and yet it's a subject that hadn't been addressed before.
In 1997, when we thought the medication was all taken care of and whatnot, I suffered a relapse, and I had come to trust Donna's judgment as well as my therapist. And after going all over helter-skelter, San Diego, buying cars, jewelry, and everything else that particular day, I was clearly out of control. And Donna and Jamie both suggested that I needed to check into the hospital. I did that, and it was a scary evening. But the support I received from my minister in terms of daily visits was just so important. I was only in for about a week or so, but I'll always remember that. The thing that has impacted our relationship, though, and still goes on today, is that Donna was constantly asking, how could I have known? What were the signs? And she was taking on a personal sense of responsibility for not identifying before I spun out of control. And so we're still grappling with this issue now. She really can't be totally knowledgeable when this is going to happen.
Working through their experiences with mental illness, Bob and Donna have discovered new ways to share their many talents and gifts with others.
The whole concept of fellowship and the connectionalism I have found in my church has been extremely important because there's just a world full of need. We had so many wonderful opportunities to meet with missionaries, do local outreach and that kind of thing.
Last year we were fortunate enough to go to Vladivostok to help with a Bible study that is being set up there with 3 United Methodist churches. And they just came over here again to visit. We've had several Russian visitors.
At our annual conference, there's a video production task force that videotapes all the plenary sessions and all the worship services of our annual meeting in June. It's a group of about 30 or 40 people. They come from all over the district, different levels of talent. And to be there in service at the annual conference, sometimes I may miss out on participating in the worship, but there's a great sense of service and working with other Christians to create a pretty good product that we have. We recognize that as in any marriage, whether it's affected with mental illness or not, there are ups and downs, and having a faith community really bolsters us during highs and lows.
It's been a really joyous journey because we went through all this together.
Disconnection from oneself, from others, and from God is a common feeling associated with mental illness. It is experienced not only by persons with mental illnesses, but also by family members. The feeling of being disconnected is a spiritual issue that leads to isolation, despair, and hopelessness. All major faiths recognize the importance of having compassion and giving care and hospitality to those who are suffering. The rituals and traditions of one faith's community can promote healing of mind, body, and spirit. They can also help persons become reconnected to their faith tradition and to God. When persons with mental illnesses and their families are included in prayers, liturgies, and pastoral care ministries of the community, they will feel more accepted in the face of society's stigma. Faith leaders can be the bridge between the family's world of formal caregivers, such as physicians, counselors, nurses, and social workers, and informal caregivers such as friends and members of the congregation. For the faith community to accept outreach to those affected by mental illness as a significant part of its mission, it must be educated about mental illnesses and the challenges posed by these disorders. The most effective way to make this happen is for persons like you and me to tell our stories of our struggles with these illnesses, or stories of those close to us. Stories of the importance of our faith in dealing with the day-to-day challenges of living with mental illness. By making mental illness a topic that can be openly addressed, we will make great strides in overcoming stigma and shame. By providing personal and programmatic ministries, we will all learn valuable spiritual lessons as we make the choice to offer true companionship to those touched by mental illness. And by reaching out in recognition that we are bound together by love and pain, both the families of those with a mental illness and the congregational family will be touched by grace. Let this be our prayer.
Let this be our prayer. Let this be our prayer. Just like every child. Just like every child. Need to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be saved.
Funding for this program has been provided by the James Irvine Foundation.
Okay, folks, in your brochures that you should have, or your packets, there's a, could you turn that light on, please? There you go. Fantastic. In your packets, there's a packet, and I don't know what color is this. What color is this? Salmon? What is that? Okay. It's called Church Ministry Involvement. If you'll dig that little sheet out, I want to talk with you about it a little bit. And yeah, and if you have a pen, that would be good. Judy will get you a pen if you don't have it. We're near the end of our presentation, and I shared with you there were two aims to this ministry these 3 times, and one was encouragement, and the other was getting involved. And so we're going to go through this together, and if you fit any of these 3 categories, you should fit one of them. If you're yourself or a client or a person dealing with a mental illness, if you have an interest in any of these ministries I'm going to go through, you'll mark it with a C for client or consumer. If you're a family member, you'll mark it with an FM, or if you are a friend, you'll mark it with an F. So I'm going to go through these with you, and you have enough information about us that if you want to talk to us further about it, you can call me or email me. All my stuff is on there. In fact, there it is on the front. So let me go through this with you very quickly and see if you have an interest. One of the big interests is to educate the congregation and your congregation about mental illness. And one of the ways we do this with our organization, our ministry, is every 3 months, if we have one of you that will be a contact person to make sure that you get some information in the church bulletin or a newsletter about mental illness. It's a short blurb that we send out. I'd ask that you'd mark one of those three categories, C, FM, or F, if you have an interest in that. The second ministry we are involved in is our support group, and we're a unique support group in that we would probably like to establish here at this church possibly a support group. And what that support group is, it's bringing together people who have a mental illness as well as the family member together. Now you say that seems like a pretty volatile thing, but we've discovered through a lot of training and working with people that if you bring both groups together and work together, especially where one stranger is talking to another stranger and they begin to tell their story, there's what begins to take place between the family member and those dealing with a mental illness. They begin to see the other side of the story. They begin to realize that it's not all their fault or the other family member fault, but it's both working together to bring about healing in both the family member and those that are dealing with a mental illness. And so if you have an interest in that, or you know of somebody that might have an interest in that, you can pass that information on to me. You have my email, my phone number, and so on for that. So that's another area. And then the third area is our friend-to-friend ministry, which I want to read to you about, which will explain it a lot better, telling you a true story, a dialogue that I had with a person with a mental illness. True story. And this is the dialogue. A young man with a mental challenge asked me one day if he could have any wish granted him except to be cured, what would it be? Now listen to this. This is very, very insightful. After some thought, he replied, I would like to have a friend who is not mentally ill. If you have anybody that you know in your life who deals with cancer, that person doesn't want to hang around with somebody that has cancer all the time. Boy, that'd be depressing, wouldn't it? It would. Well, this young man's no different. This person would see me not just as an individual with a mental health challenge, but much more, as a son, as a brother who has several interests, hobbies, and dreams. I want a friend that encourages me with plans and aspirations. I want to be listened to rather than to be manipulated and put upon. And oh yes, I want to laugh and feel alive again. Don't all of us like to feel that way? We want a friend. Now people that deal with mental illness, not all, but a high percentage of them, have been incarcerated or have been hospitalized for years. They've been told what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And they have become isolated and discouraged and defeated. And wouldn't it be neat to be able to come alongside of a person like that and be their friend? Not telling them what to do, how to do it, because they've done that all their lives. But somebody that's there beside them, listening to them and encouraging them. I want to share with you a true story. I've shared this many, many times. And every time I share it, I begin to start getting weepy about it. And hopefully I'll hold it together. This is one of the first gentlemen that I worked with, and he dealt with paranoid schizophrenia. Remember we did a little ditty on that last week? And this young man, I took him out for a Coke, and we went to Burger King, one of my favorite places. Used to be my favorite place, but not anymore. But took him there, and we sat down. We started talking about this and that. And for some reason, I asked him a question, and the question was this. If you could have one wish, what would it be other than being cured of this illness? What would it be? And he took about a few seconds, and he said, I'd like to play the piano again. I haven't played it in 20 years. I said, oh, okay. So the next time we met, which is the next week, I had I had arranged for him to come to a church, and we had a piano there for him. And so he came in and I says, that piano's for you to play for a while. And go ahead. He says, well, I don't know if I can do this. I said, well, try. So he began to play the piano. Made a lot of clinkers, a lot of mistakes. And I thought, well, to get rid of his fear and his anxiety, I'm going to excuse myself for a few minutes, 20 minutes or so, and let him kind of play the piano. So I left, and I came back in about a half hour, and he was still making his clinkers, but you could see his countenance change. He had a smile on his face. He had a sense of accomplishment. And so that morning or that afternoon, he walked out there with me and he says, could I come back and play the piano again next week? And so this young man did. He came back and he played, and we went back several times. And as I met with him for a long time, I began to see this man change. He began to feel, and you could see it in his face, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of living, not existing, living. And he changed. All because of an act of kindness. All because I listened to him. And I could share you story after story of working with people. And it's amazing, the people I've worked with over the years have been people with paranoid schizophrenia. I haven't looked for these people. They've just been in my life. And I've been able, and so have many of my volunteers who I train to be listening. You know, all of us, for the most part, like to talk. We'd like to give advice. And I think that's the reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we listen rather than talk. And I train people how to listen, how to encourage. And I said, when you go out to see these people, you're not going out to just share about Jesus. You can do that, but you need to be praying through your time with this person. This is a person. This isn't a project here. This is a person. And he or she needs some tender, loving care. So I train people. And then we have support groups that kind of help us learn how to encourage, what to do, what not to do. And they meet with them usually on a weekly basis, take them out for coffee or go play racquetball or whatever they like to do. I just be their friend. And keep that in mind, to be their friend. And as you're their friend, some wonderful things happen. So if you have an interest in being a volunteer to do something like this, mark it on your sheet. If you are a person who's dealing with a mental illness and would have an interest in having a friend like this, we'd ask that you'd mark it with a C. So that's that one. Let's move on. Nami, who was here a few minutes ago, talked about family to family. I understand about family to family because my wife and I were one of the first ones that started this family to family. It's a lot more intensive training and education than what we offer for 3 or 4 sessions. It really gets into the nuts and bolts heavily. So if you have an interest in being in this family to family and taking it here in Marion County, we'd ask that you'd mark that down too. And I think they're going to have one in a couple of weeks, if I remember right. And it's for 12 weeks, 3 hours. There's no charge, by the way. There's no charge for family to family. What? What is it? All right, 8 or 10. I've just got the new news here. And then we put out a newsletter on a quarterly basis, and if you would like to be on that newsletter or per letter, we'd ask that you'd mark accordingly for that. And then the next section is I make no apologies for. This ministry does not exist on green stamps. Maybe you don't understand what I'm talking about. It's not free. It costs us to do these ministries. And now we used to years ago charge for these seminars. But because we've been able to raise the funds that we've been able to do, God has been so generous to us and has helped us. So if you have an interest in providing financially for us, we'd ask that you'd mark that too. And then the next one is, prayer support. We could sure use your prayers. And then if you're working with a person living with a mental illness, we'd ask you to mark that too. You don't have to put a name on there though, but just for our own information. And then finally, in concluding our time together tonight, there's another sheet that's an evaluation sheet that helps us improve our seminars or workshops that we do. It should be the last sheet on your right, if I remember right. And is this gray, Judy? Okay. I'm colorblind if you haven't figured that out yet. It's called Hope for Feeling. So I'd ask that you take a couple of minutes and fill out that evaluation. And then when you finish that and you finish the other one I just asked you to fill out, when you finish, just come up here to this front pew and put them right down here, and then you're dismissed. So let's have a word of prayer, and then you ladies can fill, and men can fill out that information. Father, we thank you for our evenings together that we've had these last couple of weeks, and pray, Father, that this information that has been given would be of help to the people here today, as well as that information being passed on to others. And Father, you never waste any time when you're talking on a subject like this. And I know, God, you're going to bring people in their lives that are going to be benefited by what's been given these last couple of evenings. And so we thank you for our time together. In your name we pray. Amen. So if you finish filling that out, both those sheets, and then bring them up here, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. What's that? Family? Be somewhere probably in Salem here. I can't tell you where because they do it various places. However you want us to contact you, whether it's phone, email, texting, whatever you want us to do, just